There's a new show out on Peacock called Surviving Mormonism. It's hosted by Heather Gay, a reality TV star famous for being on the cast of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, as well as The Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip. She also wrote a book called Bad Mormon, and more recently a book called Good Time Girl. Let's watch some clips and see what Surviving Mormonism gets right and gets very wrong about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
The very first hugely marketable influencers were Mormon. It was Pink Peonies, Rachel Parcell, Carol Laurent, Anna Neeleman, Ballerina Farm. Seems so simple and pure, and they seem so happy. It's not how it really is, it's exactly what the church is going for. You want to have all of this? Join the Mormon church. You can have it too. That wasn't my experience.
Okay, so here's the deal. Basically, it feels like she's saying that Hannah Neeleman and all of these people who seem to be happy in the church are actually just pretending. It's all fake because that wasn't her experience. I think that's a pretty wild claim to make. Discounting someone else's experience just because it was different from yours is a pretty bold accusation that I think lacks a lot of nuance. Both things can be true at once. You can have a bad experience in the church, and these people can all have great experiences. You don't have to say all members are lying. Portraying people who disagree with you as liars is a great way to avoid meaningfully engaging with them, but it's often just not true.
Nobody talks about negative things within the church. We don't discuss it. We don't, dig deep. We don't investigate anything.
The church has been actively advocating for investigation and research for years. They're addressing controversial questions in the Gospel Topics essays. They've published virtually every known document associated with Joseph Smith online for the public to study. They published a new 4-volume church history series called Saints, complete with citations for those who want to dive deeper. On top of what the church is doing, we've got a growing number of Latter-day Saint content creators having those tough conversations. Is there always room to improve? Sure, but does not mean those resources aren't available or that nobody else is doing that.
We believe that there are 3 separate levels of heaven, and you have to live a life of perfection in order to achieve the celestial kingdom and live together with your family forever.
That's not true. The church does not teach that you have to live a life of perfection that would completely invalidate the atonement of Jesus Christ. We are all going to make mistakes, and we believe it is only through the grace of Christ that we even have the opportunity to live with God again. Elder Holland even dedicated an entire general conference talk to debunking this idea.
Making sure you meet all of the standards of the church, not swearing, not looking at porn, not looking at R-rated movies.
To make a long story short, it's been more than 25 years since any general authorities have specifically counseled against watching R-rated movies. The church absolutely counsels us to be wise with our media choices and not to watch content that is degrading or vulgar or inappropriate, which understandably might include most R-rated movies. But this is one where leaders teach correct principles and let us govern ourselves. Also, we're not going to show it, but within 10 minutes of this series, they're already showing hidden camera footage of Latter-day Saint temple ceremonies. I don't know that there is anything more disrespectful towards Latter-day Saints that Peacock and Bravo could have done than this, which is unfortunate.
I grew up with same-sex attraction, but I didn't want it. I wanted something more than what I was. So I began on a journey to find the truth that could help me become a whole man. Now, I find myself here. I'm 50 years old. I'm happily married with a thriving family. I have helped thousands of men in their journeys to overcome same-sex attraction. And now, I'm here to help you. Wow. I believed this for a long time.
Okay, so here's the deal. The first episode of Surviving Mormonism is mostly focused on the church's history with the LGBT community and conversion therapy. While I have been very critical of some of the things the host of this show says, I have a lot more compassion towards the people she interviews. This is David Matheson. He used to be a conversion therapist until he himself eventually came out as gay. Everyone knows the church's stance on marriage. I don't need to beat a dead horse. The church's stance on homosexuality has not changed. But what has changed over the years is how we approach this topic. President Christofferson's brother is gay. Elder Gong has a gay son. These are not distant topics for our leaders. And I think as an institution, there's a lot more understanding and compassion and love and acceptance than maybe there used to be, and I think that's great.
Can you imagine being a mom and you see your child suffering and not only do you have no support and you're not even supposed to speak on it or speak about it, but you're supposed to reject your child. And then the reason you're supposed to reject your child is because you f***ed him up in the first place.
So we've all heard stories from both inside and outside of the church of parents disowning their kids when they come out as gay. That's horrible. That should never happen. It's an absolute tragedy if and when it does. That said, thankfully, I feel like I hear those stories less and less, and the church has built out much better ways for parents to have those tough conversations. For example, the church has a whole web page that counsels members on how to respond when a loved one comes out. This is a longer quote, but check this out. This is from the church's website. Although you may not always know how to respond to the struggles your family member faces, you will never regret reaching out with love and understanding. You will never regret saying, "I love you." You will never regret throwing your arms around your loved one and hugging him or her. You will never regret listening. You will never regret trying to understand. The law of chastity is a real commandment, but it's also a real commandment to love one another, and that's something I think we're getting better and better at.
The truth is, we both know that these doctrines and these retreats and these therapeutic practices are still going on today, and they're endorsed by the church today.
If she's referring here to conversion therapy, she's absolutely wrong on this point. The church's stance on conversion therapy is very clear. Again, this is something you can look up in the handbook. Section 31.3.6 states, the church opposes any therapy, including conversion or reparative therapy for sexual orientation or gender identity, that subjects a person to abusive practices. LDS Family Services released a statement back in 2019 reiterating that Family Services has a long-standing and express policy against using therapies that seek to repair, convert, or change sexual orientation, such as from homosexual to heterosexual. Research demonstrates that electric shock, aversion, and other analogous therapies are ineffective and harmful to youth who experience same-sex attraction. Those, including youth who seek therapies that constitute sexual orientation change efforts, will not receive them from family services counselors. I am grateful that the younger generation will not have to face all of the same trials that some of the older generation might have faced. I'm not giving anyone a get-out-of-jail-free card for mistakes of the past, but it's also okay to celebrate how far we've come.
You are supposed to give 10% of your income. That is reconciled once a month. And at the end of the year, you're forced to sit in front of your local leader who knows how much you've been paying. And they ask you directly, are you a full tithe payer? And you have to say yes or no.
Couple of things here. First, nobody is forced to go sit down with their bishop for tithing declaration. All ward members are invited to participate in that, but there are literally zero consequences or punishments if you don't. This is just my personal experience, but I've never had a bishop ask to review my personal finances to make absolutely sure I'm a full tithe payer. That would be insanely tedious and invasive. It's just the honor system.
If a destitute family is faced with the decision of paying their tithing or eating, they should pay their tithing.
So this is just wildly manipulative, and I'd say even borderline malicious. I get that this is a juicy soundbite that can make the church look bad, but intentionally clipping off his next sentence is brutally irresponsible. Let's listen to what he actually says next.
If a destitute family is faced with the decision of paying their tithing or eating, they should pay their tithing. The bishop can help them with their food.
The church takes care of its own. They are not going to demand tithing and then let those families starve. The reality is that destitute members who pay their tithing and then receive food from the bishop's storehouse are very likely receiving much more than they are giving. And the church is happy to help. That's exactly what their welfare resources are there for.
I don't want to be that disappointment and ruin my whole family lineage, because that's the whole thing. If you don't finish your mission, you disappoint not only yourself, but your whole lineage.
You know, when he kept saying like letting down his entire lineage, like, I just know that just rings so true to me. I mean, that's how I feel every day, because I don't know why they tell us that to us so much.
All right, so I understand the social stigma surrounding finishing your mission. I acknowledge that it's hard for a lot of people to come home early. I don't want to diminish that at all. But this idea that if you don't finish your mission, you are disappointing your entire family lineage?
Dishonor on you! Dishonor on your cow!
I've been a member my entire life, and I don't think I've ever heard this before. maybe just my experience. Let me know if I just haven't been on the loop on this or if this is like totally out of left field.
Joseph Smith claimed he was visited by angels who showed him and only him gold plates with ancient text telling him the story of Jesus' second coming in America.
That is super creepy.
Well, my whole life, I heard stories about Joseph Smith being tarred and feathered because he was a prophet. They were reluctant to accept the gospel. But the truth is, he was tarred and feathered because two brothers found him sleeping with their 14-year-old sister. That's why they were run out of town.
This is absolutely not true. Even the non-Latter-day Saint author John Turner, who wrote a recent biography on Joseph Smith, said that this was a rumor that emerged decades after the fact, and I quote, "There is no evidence to support the charge."
The disciplinary council is a public flame cataloging everything you've ever done wrong, and that you should be repentant for.
No, it's not. It's a private, confidential council that meets to discuss specific misconduct. You can read all about what this council looks like in Handbook Section 32.10.3.
It's basically a purging of every sexual sin in front of 12 men that you've may or may not have ever met before.
This is also not true. There is a broad spectrum of sexual sin. It does not always result in a membership council, as per Handbook Section 32.6.2.5.
If you were to go back in through the doors today and say, I have a beautiful daughter, a companion who I love and cherish, and I want to be active in the church, we know what they would say to you.
Yeah, I'm not welcome.
I would hope that's not true. If people choose not to strive to follow gospel standards, their participation may be limited, but as per an official statement from the church back in 2014, all visitors are welcome to our chapels and premises so long as they respect our standards of conduct while there. I would hope that anyone, regardless of their sexuality, would be treated with love and dignity at church. If that is not the case, then members need to do better. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit here. The last 2 episodes of Surviving Mormonism focus almost exclusively on horrible, horrible stories of abuse. I don't know anywhere near all of the details of the cases that were highlighted, so we're not going to go too deep into their specific stories. But here's what I will say. Any abuse, whether inside or outside of the church, is reprehensible. It is unimaginably harmful, shameful, and deeply sinful. It has been consistently denounced in the strongest terms from the pulpit, and the church has policies in place to prevent as much abuse as possible. Anyone who interacts with children or youth through their calling at church has to go through child protection training every 3 years. The handbook requires that at least 2 adults must be present at all church activities attended by children and youth. There are extensive resources on the church's website to help navigate these issues, along with a live helpline available for leaders 24/7, which we'll talk more about in a bit. Are all of these systems and policies perfect? No. Humans make mistakes, and perpetrators are always going to look for ways to circumvent safety measures. I hope that we can take stories like the ones from the show and learn from them and improve those systems. This is Liz. She was abused for years by her father, who was a member of the church. When her mom found out, she told the local bishop, and it sounds like the bishop downplayed it.
We were pretty open with discussing it in our family, like throughout the years. And I kind of heard later on from my mom and my dad kind of what was discussed.
And what did that bishop say to her?
Essentially, you need to be a better wife, you need to be a better member, you need to read your scriptures more, make sure that you're doing family home evening. And
Like, be a more supportive wife, does that mean have more sex with your husband?
The phrase that I remember hearing was to be more available to him.
If that's how it went down, this bishop made a terrible mistake. He should have reported it to the police, or if he was legally unable to due to clergy confidentiality laws, he should have asked the mom to report it. He should have protected that little girl. I'm assuming this abuse occurred in the 1990s, so I'm not sure if this resource existed yet, but the church's website currently unequivocally states, no church leader should ever dismiss a report of abuse or counsel an individual not to report criminal activity.
It should be when someone reports a crime, you call the local authorities. And then if you need spiritual help or guidance after you've reported it to the authorities, then call us. The last person in that equation should be a law firm. that's there to serve and protect the interest and reputation of the church. Someone needs to serve and protect the interests of the children that are being passed around.
So I know that this is understandably the immediate visceral reaction we have when abuse comes to light. Call the police and get these people behind bars and as far away as possible from vulnerable people. Frankly, there's a part of me that is quite partial to the millstone around the neck and dropped into the sea approach. But for better or worse, different states and countries have different laws surrounding mandatory reporting. I support whatever systems are best for preventing abuse and supporting victims. The helpline and mandatory reporting laws are topics that I want to dig into a bit more in the future. I want to gain a better understanding of those subjects before I come on here and pretend to have all the answers. Bishops are regular dudes. They're your friends and neighbors. They're not legal experts. They very likely have next to zero experience dealing with abuse. That is why the helpline was created back in 1995, to help leaders navigate these cases and protect victims. We hear a lot of stories these days about the helpline failing to protect victims. That should never happen. At the same time, when all we hear about are the negative pieces of the puzzle, it can create a distorted view of the bigger picture. And when this show accuses the church of doing something or not doing something, I'm also recognizing that we don't have a representative from the church there to give the other side of the story. The reality is that we live in a fallen world where some people do horrible things behind closed doors, and we need to be alert and aware even in our own communities. In any case, no free passes for anyone. As Latter-day Saints, we can be quite good at giving people the benefit of the doubt and sometimes being overly trusting. As the church's website states, be aware that abusers can be cunning, manipulative, and deceitful, so their version of events may differ from that of the victim. In all cases, consider foremost the safety and protection of the victim.
I was a bishop for 3 weeks. Like my third Sunday, a 17-year-old girl came to me who just had sex like the night before. And she just felt terrible. And she's just bawling. And then she asked me this question that just triggered me. She says, well, don't you need to know the details? Come to find out, the previous bishop is asking details.
Yeah, he brings up a good point here. When someone comes to the bishop for help with repentance, the bishop does not need to get all of the nitty-gritty details. As per Handbook Section 32.8.1, ask only for enough information to determine 1. The member's attitude toward the sinful behavior, and 2. The nature, frequency, and duration of the behavior. Do not ask for details beyond what is necessary to understand the situation. Do not ask questions that arise from personal curiosity. I support any initiative that results in better training for local leaders regarding how to handle cases of abuse. And I would not at all be surprised to see improvements in that respect in the future. I've had a lot of amazing bishops, but they're volunteers. I think a lot of the issues brought up in Surviving Mormonism could have been avoided if local leaders had more training and were better prepared to handle these kinds of situations. So I think that's something we can do better at.
I mean, all I did was listen to his story, you know? That's all I did. I feel sad that I was part of the problem for so long. And I guess I know how devout I was and what it would have taken for someone to make me think or feel differently.
So this is a bit sneaky. Of course, I totally advocate for listening to victims of abuse. As the church's website states, the church advocates for the same thing. But when she says, I feel sad that I was part of the problem for so long, it feels like she's trying to say that anyone who is a devout member of the church is part of the problem. If something bad happens in connection with a certain group, it does not mean that everyone associated with that group is complicit or shares in the blame.
The corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is harmful, deceitful, and I do see it as evil.
If we could have a conversation around cult techniques and cult behavior, and if it didn't eradicate the beautiful parts of my childhood and the wonderful things my parents did for me, I would just say it easily, you know? My parents were in a cult, and it doesn't mean that my childhood was tainted or that my parents were bad people or that my family didn't have real love and real experiences, but I was raised in a cult.
So this is the narrative being pushed by a lot of critics today. Back in the day, it seemed like the critical narrative was just that the church was false, but relatively harmless. We were just the nice folks you could poke fun at without any backlash. But now there's a growing mountain of media portraying the church and its members as dangerous, violent, and abusive, that we're all part of a harmful, hurtful, evil cult. I could not disagree more. I love the church. I love my faith. I love the emphasis on Jesus Christ and peacemaking and service and love and mercy and atonement and family and relationship with God. It's tragic that some people have terrible experiences in the church. My heart mourns for them, and there are ways we can do better. But the church is overwhelmingly good. I've been a member for too long and have seen too much to ever believe that this is an institutionally malevolent organization. Even if it's false, which I don't believe it is, I would still believe it is incredibly good. One thing Surviving Mormonism brings up, which we didn't talk about yet, was the secret lives of Mormon wives. Season 3 just barely came out. I suffered through all 10 episodes. Here's our reaction video. Check it out. I'll see you there.